like that, and then we will begin. So good morning, Jeff. Looking forward to finding out from Joe. So as I said, with all these meetings, for those few that have just joined us, please feel free to ask questions as we go along. I will hand over to Joe in about 10 seconds, and we're going to run through until about 10:30, Joe, if that is okay with you. So without further ado, let me introduce you to a young man. This is unprecedented from my perspective. It's the first time ever that anybody has come back and delivered a session for a third time. That alone, a third time in less than, it feels like a really short period of time, Joe, but it's probably a year, but I don't think it is. I think the first time was the back end of last year. So every time we have Joe on, we get lots of questions. And we get lots of people watch the videos. We get lots of comments, lots of things on LinkedIn and in the Facebook groups around ways that we can use the stuff that Joe shares with us. So without further ado, I am very excited to learn, Joe, how this Power BI thingy can work and make my life easier. So without further ado, I will do a virtual round of applause and hand you over to Joe.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, so obviously, as discussed today, we're going through Power BI, and I appreciate that the people watching this probably going to be at varying different degrees of knowledge regarding Power BI, what it is, and how you can use it within your own business. So, starting with essentially a bit of an introduction to Power BI and to its purpose. I'm guessing from the accountants world that everyone's really familiar with Excel, use it religiously. You know, it's probably one of your strong tools that you like to go and manipulate data and do calculations and those kind of things. So basically, my summary description for Power BI is it's like Excel on steroids. So you can do a lot more, a lot quicker with Power BI than you can with Excel. But to kind of touch on its main purpose is for reporting, dashboard, visualization of data. So rather than just looking at everything in a table format with some sums at the end of it, the idea behind Power BI is to really bring to screen visual infographics that relate to that data, so that you can make better business decisions by evaluating it at a glance. Rather than trying to hone into the detail. So that's where Power BI works really well. And obviously, before we kind of get started too much on the demonstrations and going through how you use Power BI, I wanted to cover a couple of things straight off the bat. And probably anyone that's been on these sessions before and seen me speak on Teams or anything else to do with Office 365, I tend to go through things really quickly, and I'll just jump through it. As Simon mentioned, the session is recorded, so don't feel too bad if you miss the key information, or if you look at something and go, I didn't quite understand that, or I'd like it slower. The idea is with the recording, you can go back and go through step by step and review it. And what I'm trying to achieve over this next hour is to cram in as much value as I possibly can to give you as much information as possible. And then with the recording, you can use that to take from that what you want. And the other thing with Power BI is, firstly, to cover an understanding of how, what it is, how you use it, how you get it, how much it costs, and those things. So I'm going to be talking about most of the demonstration.
I think I've lost you, Joe. I've lost Joe.
Oh,
there we go. You've come back again. If you speak, there we go. We've got you. I don't know. No, it is. It did freeze, Jerry. I've got you. Slight panic there because I thought I was doing a Power BI presentation, and then for a minute, which I said at the start,
I'm just looking at my internet connection as well. As mentioned before, unfortunately, I have had a few internet connections drop out over the last few days, which isn't great. Blaming Virgin on that one, but
and I'm just on the sound, Joe. I don't know whether it's the lapel mic or not, or whether there's just a little bit of feedback on that mic again. So I don't know whether there's
just give me 1 second. Live webinars. Let's switch to desktop mic.
So just while you do that, I'm happy to sing a song. So if there's anybody in the room that would like me to sing a song, then just pop it in the chat box and I will gladly do that. Hurry up, Joe, please. Hurry up.
Right.
No, I'm not going to sing a song. I'm definitely not going to sing a song.
Okay, it's now on the USB mic. Is that
Perfect. That's a lot better. That's spot on. Yeah, it's a little quiet, but it's a lot better. It's a lot clearer.
Yeah. Okay. I'll see what I can do in terms of position. I might just have to speak louder into the microphone.
Yeah.
So
I'll turn you up.
Internet's looking okay at the moment. So yeah, just give me a nudge, Simon, if it does go off, and apologies to people if it does drop out. So yeah, in terms of Power BI, you've got a desktop version that you can download onto your computer where you can manipulate data. So again, thinking about Microsoft Excel, it sits there, you access local files on it, and you can open up Excel files and CSVs. So you can do exactly the same thing with Power BI Desktop. So on that, let's just start sharing the screen. Oh, I'm struggling to hear. Just Simon, just check in, just make sure.
Yeah, I can hear you.
You can hear me, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Just move the microphone closer to my voice. Okay.
Turn it up a bit, Nikolai.
Yeah, can hear, but it's softer. I'll just have to speak quite clearly into the microphone. So I'm going to just share my screen now, and I'll show you the Power BI interface. Do that out the way. Okay, so internet dropped again. Simon.
Yeah, no, I can see you. I can see it. I can see you're working perfectly my end. There's a screen full of numbers and stuff that scare me a little bit, but I can definitely see it.
Okay, great. It's just I noticed the internet dropped off for a second again as well. That's going to be frustrating. Right, so just firstly taking through Power BI Desktop. This is an application. I've got a few windows open, but Power BI Desktop is something that you can basically go online and install. I'll just show you briefly. So if you go online and type in Power BI Desktop, this is now, don't actually need Office 365. You don't need a Microsoft account to actually download this application. Anybody can go online, hit download. Actually does it through the store. We can actually do it through the download center. So you can go onto this page to download Power BI, choose your language, hit download, and it will, like any other application, it will download the application and you can install it onto your computer. Once it's installed, you would go through and choose Power BI Desktop from your PC. And then it opens. Close the store. When Power BI Desktop opens for the first time, you will be greeted with a Getting Started window, which will basically just give you some video guides. So I recommend taking a look at those as well when it opens. I do have like 4 or 5 windows open for Power BI, which is probably slowing the machine down as well. And then the idea, though, generally is that we are able within Power BI to create dashboards and reports with multiple pages, with pulling in all sorts of data from lots of different sources and able to visualize that in a way that makes more sense to the business. And I'm going to explain and rebuild some of these reports and show you how that works. Okay. So when Power BI opens for the first time for you, if you go and install it, you get a window that looks like this. So on here, you've got a Getting Started guide. So I'd recommend, as well as covering this session today, take a look at some of these videos. It will give you a lot of the basics as to how to use Power BI and build reports. It gives you the ability to go onto the blog and the forums, and there's more tutorials you can get access to from there. And then on the left-hand side, a bit like a lot of the Office applications, you've then got the ability to open recent files, and you can pin files in there, so reports that you use on a regular basis. And then you've got get data and recent sources. One of the things that you will notice is I'm currently signed in. When you use Power BI for the first time, it will probably ask you to sign in with a Microsoft account. If you have an Office 365 account, I recommend just sign in with that, and it will probably at that point offer you a free trial of the Pro version for 90 days or 60 days. Try that as well, because you'll be able to use all of the functionality of Power BI, including the online service. So Power BI is made up in two sections. You've got the Power BI desktop, which is what we're looking at right now. And then there is the service that's online that Microsoft provide called Power BI Service. And that allows you to publish reports online. And particularly if you're using Office 365, you can then share those reports with other people in your organization so that they can go and interact with that data as well. So if you do have an account, sign in. If you don't have an account, just click on the button that says you already have an account, and then hit close in the top right hand corner. And then even without having a Microsoft account or signing in, you will still get to this interface, this window. Just to talk you through this window a little bit, you are greeted with basically a blank area, and this is basically your workspace or your dashboard. This is your area where you can start to drop reports and graphs and charts and tables and things like that. So at the moment it's blank. We have no data in this report at all, and we've got nothing to report on. So first thing we need to do with Power BI is actually give it some data. So the whole benefit of Power BI is feeding it data and then visualizing that data in different ways. So we do that by hitting Get Data. And if we hit the actual icon for Get Data, it will open up and it gives you a list of all of the different sources of information you can use to pull in data to Power BI. We're going to go through a few of these, but mainly we're going to cover Excel, CSV type formats, but we're going to also demonstrate how you can interact with web pages as well, and other sources from Office 365. Now, if we just whip through this quickly, this is all of the sources. You might spot things like Google Analytics, and that might trigger you to think, oh, I could pull my Google Analytics data in alongside some other data. If you're using Sales Navigator, you could pull that in. So you can start to look at trends developing where, people are looking at websites, people might be looking, if you have got Sales Navigator, people looking at your LinkedIn data. And there's a whole raft of sources of information that you can pull in to Power BI. The other one, if you've got an application which uses a SQL database that's either on-premise or even in the cloud, you can also tap into SQL databases. So CRM type packages and things like that, you can use the information from those and bring them straight into Power BI. But first off, we're just going to do a demonstration of a very simple Excel file, and we're going to connect to that. So I've got some sample data here. So this is all kind of general Contoso Microsoft sample data that I'm just pulling in to demonstrate. So we can pull in information from, let's say we're a global organization and we've pulled data back from the various regions, Asia, Europe, and North America. So I'm going to pull through the Asia data. So again, all I've done is clicked on Get Data, choose Excel. Now it's opened up and it's given me these two options. One is a table, because the Excel sheet itself was formatted in a table. And then the other is basically just the sheet. The only real difference between those is the formatted data will give the titles, it'll automatically do the titles as well as long as it's top row, but that's formatted in the table and that's just the sheet. I'm going to choose the sheet because it's got the title of the name in. And then what we can do, we've got two options at the bottom. We can either load the data in straight away so we can start using it in Power BI, or we can transform the data. initially I'm just going to load this data in, but I will show you how to transform it from here as well. Okay, so it's now loading in all of the data from the Asia region for our fake company. And it says it's got some errors, but it's loaded 115 rows. Okay, so straight away now what you can see on the right hand side with fields is we can see that data source, the table there, and we can see all of the fields that are available to us. These are basically columns. To kind of point this out in Excel, just so you can see what we're looking at if we were to open it in Excel. I'll leave that to open. So we've got the field names here. They're the columns essentially, and that's our table. And this is how we interact with data in Power BI, is we use these fields, and we're able to basically drag these fields into our canvas area here. Okay, so you can see what it looks like in Excel. So this is pretty typical, lots of columns of data with lots of rows of information. And you can see we've got different regions, different countries, IDs, and employee numbers.
I think you've frozen again, Joe, my end. Can anybody else hear Joe, or is it just me? Can't hear either. Rosalind can't hear Joe. Yeah, frozen guy, can't hear Chris. Let me just see if I can do that.
All the stuff that we've been
there you go. You come back again, Joe. We lost you there for a minute, mate. So we got up to the bit where you'd imported the Excel spreadsheet. Ah, there we go.
Yeah, internet dropouts again. I'm just going to see if I don't think it's Wi-Fi. I think it's just my internet, but give me 1 second. Sorry about this.
It's all right, Joe. So if anybody's got any jokes, if anybody wants to put any jokes in the chat box, then I will gladly read those out. If not, I'll tell you about my guppies. So we're now on the 3rd lot of baby guppies since the lockdown. So the guppies keep having fish, and we've also got some chicks in the house at the moment. So I keep chickens, and we should have chicks at work, but because we've got the lockdown at the moment, those chicks. So Mark says he's not editing this out. That's okay, Mark. I'm just filling. So it'll be something interesting. Anyway, we've got some chicks. We should have some chicks at work, and because we're not in the office, those chicks are currently at home, but they're going today. So we currently have 10 baby chicks. 7 of them are going back to Madeline, who brings the chicks to the office, and I'm keeping 3 of them. So a cockerel and 2 hens. So with a bit of luck, I'll have, I will have 10 chickens come the end of the summer. I'm not quite sure what that means, Mark, about DNS, but or DNR. Oh, do not read. So I shouldn't have read that out either. So anyway.
Okay, right. I plugged it in. I don't think it is the Wi-Fi. I think it's the internet, but we'll see how we get on now.
Brilliant. And just to answer Dan, when I share the recording, can you please share the previous recording as well, or links to them? Yes, Dan, I can. There's 2 previous recordings, and I'll let you. I'll put those, or Mark, can you make sure you put those in? We might even put them in the chat box now, Dan, so you've got them before we disappear. Brilliant. So I've got you back, Joe, sharing the screen. Brilliant. So I can, I'll disappear again.
Fine. Just, yeah, give me a nudge if things go again. And like I say, I apologize, but it's not a lot I can do about my internet at the moment. Okay, so so back onto what the spreadsheet. So we're pulling this data, which you would typically look at in Excel with not a lot of visual information that makes it easy for you to make decisions. You can obviously, within Excel, you can create pivot charts, and you can create pivot tables, and you can do some of that stuff already in Excel, which is great. But I think Power BI makes it a load easier and more interactive. So will show you. So that's the data, and then within Power BI, essentially we've pulled this data in. So from here, we can go and start dragging things like continent, drag it into the canvas, and it's just created an average there. We can take things like the actual revenue, and we can drag that on. And you can see it's dropped continent into values when really actually it's more of a legend item. Although that's the number. So this is where the data transformation bit comes in, because we've got these tables, and this table we don't exactly know what does what. So the next stage in this is to actually go in and do transform data. So when we loaded the data in the first place, we had the ability to either load or transform. We've loaded the data and it's in here, but if you then need to go to transform it, on the home ribbon, we've got transform data, and we're just going to choose that. This opens the Power Query Editor. So this is also available. It's a similar thing that's available in Excel, where you can actually manipulate data and pull different sources of data in, and then format that data. But this is where you get a lot of benefits from not repeating tasks over and over again. I know that a lot of times people get Excel data files, which they might get on a monthly basis or fairly consistently for reports, and then they have to go through and format it. So change some of the title bits, maybe split columns out. But watch what happens when we use the Power BI Query Editor to actually manipulate that data. So first off, we can see there's a few rows here that have got null values in it. So there's just empty blank rows. So that's when it was sent to us, it wasn't really formatted properly, or somebody's made a mistake. So that doesn't look good, and it will affect how our data looks when it comes to reporting. So what we could do is at the top, we can hit the remove rows button, and we can do remove blank rows. Straight away, those nulls have vanished. And if you look on the right hand side, these are the applied steps. So we can manage manipulating the data, and everything that we do is automatically kept here. So we remove blank rows, and we can see that's applied there. We've also got these errors in this actual column. I'm just going to scroll down, have a look what's in. So basically the actual column, it looks like somebody's just, one of the locations has just copied the data from city name, but we've got some errors on that. We don't actually need to keep that column of data. So we could choose the actual column, hit remove columns, and tell it to remove that one as well. Now what it needs to be understood is, in all these steps, is we're not actually changing the data. So the Excel sheet that this is referencing is still the same Excel sheet with all of the data in the exact same way. But what we're doing in Power BI is we're giving it a model as to how to use that data. So that's good. So you know that you can do this at zero risk to the actual data. You're not editing or deleting data. You're just manipulating which bits you get to see. And at any point, if you've done something and you think, oh, actually, I didn't mean to do that, or that's not the intended result, you can actually go back through the history and remove certain elements. So if we realize we did need the actual column, all we need to do is undo that step, and it puts the actual column back for you. So it's as simple as that. So we're going to remove that again. We don't need the actual column. Okay, the next bit we're looking at is this. We've got the state and region, and for some reason, you know, those are two separate bits of information that we'd like to analyze, but for whatever reason, it's been kind of summarized in one column. So a bit like you would do in Excel, we would want to split that column into two so that we can see the different state and region. But there is another problem as well that we can spot, which is some people have used the data in different ways. So sometimes they've used commas and sometimes they've used semicolons. So we've got another challenge there. So if I was to use a delimiter, for example, again, this is very similar to how you would do these things in Excel. We can choose that column, hit transform on the ribbon, and we could split the column. But obviously, if we split the column by delimiter and we choose comma and each occurrence of the delimiter, if we was to do that right now, it's broken because a lot of them have semicolons as well. So again, we could have spotted that too late, realized that it's not worked. We just remove that step. It goes back to how it was. Sorry, remove that step. Goes back to how it was. And then what we actually want to do is we want to standardize the commas or semicolons. So with this, we could just do a replace values. And replace values gives us the ability to find something, anything. This could be text or a symbol. So for example, I don't want semicolons in this. I want everything to have a comma. And if I hit OK on that, it's now gone through, and every separator now is a comma, not a semicolon, and it's added that step here. Also, you'll notice on the right side, there's like this cog window or cog option. That basically, if you've made a mistake or you want to change what that task does, you can go in, choose the cog and change or alter that step as well. So now we've got commas on everything. I'm going to split that column into two. So let's go back to split column. We're going to do it by delimiter. The other thing you might not be able to see is it's a comma and a space. So it's not just, if we just split it by comma, it's going to start the second word with a space. So actually, instead of just comma, we want a custom delimiter, and we want that to be comma space. And each occurrence is fine. If there was more than one comma, let's say, for example, a word has a comma involved in it, we'd probably choose leftmost delimiter and hit OK. OK, that's now split that column into two. So we've got the state and region as described in this data. Obviously, the state region 1 and state region 2 isn't very informative for which fields we're going to be using. So we want to tidy that up. So I've just double clicked on the header. That's going to be our state, and the next column will be our region. Okay, so you can start to get the idea that you can build this up, and this is looking at the data behind it rather than any of the rather than modifying the actual Excel file. It's bringing that data in raw, and then it's applying all these steps every time.
So Joe, just before you move on, I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
One of which, when you pulled up the list for the importing the data, we didn't notice 0 on there, but Tim's asked.
No, 0 isn't on that list, but I will show you, once we've gone through the rest of it, I'm going to show you the online service pack that connects to 0.
Perfect. So that is possible. It's just not there at the moment.
Yes.
And then Craig has asked, will these rules apply to the next set of data imported if it is in the same format as the original data?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly the point, is that instead of repeating tasks, if you get consistent, as long as the data that's fed in is consistent, and that could be consistently bad, it could be badly formatted or whatever, but you can basically apply rules, and every time you refresh the data, and this is the other key to remember about importing, is that Power BI and this Power Query can stop you from having to manually pull data in. You could have it, for example, so a CSV is emailed the CSV is dropped into a certain folder in SharePoint, as an example, and then Power BI points at that folder or those files, and every time that that's updated, when you go in Power BI, you just have to hit refresh. You don't have to remember to go to find the file each time. It just brings the data in automatically.
So, and I just, from a personal perspective, so I export data out of Zoom before, like when I send you the stuff this morning, I export the data out of Zoom, it comes out into a CSV file. I then have to carry out just 2 or 3 things basically to put it into a format that I'm comfortable sending it to you in. I could basically connect that to Power BI. It automatically runs those steps and puts it in a format that I can send to you without me having to right mouse click, delete the line, reformat the. Excellent. Brilliant. Thank you.
That's where a massive time saving, and again, this I'm saying about Power BI, but this is Power Query. So all of these things that you see here, in fact, let me just show you briefly in here. So all of the things that you can do in Power BI on the latest couple of versions of Excel, you can also do it here. Again, this is probably a tip that's going to help a lot of people if they want to continue to pull data in to Excel. So for example, if we go to data on the Excel bar, you've got the same windows. So you've got that get data option. And so we can do exactly the same thing. And we can even combine queries. So for example, we can, as well as this, we can then go and get more data, add it to the bottom of this. So let me just show you. We are going to import data. Got to find the Power BI training. So we could pull in Geography Europe as well. Choose that sheet. Load that. Okay, and similar to the to Power BI, we've got this queries and connections here, and we can then go in and we can edit those, and it creates a Power Query editor within Excel, and then it's a very similar interface that we've just been looking at Power BI, all the same functions. So you can do exactly the same thing, and this is where you can, for example, you can merge queries. So if you wanted to, if you had two sets of Excel data, and it's the same format, the same columns, but you wanted the whole thing, so all the different regions, you could merge the queries and have them as one big sheet with all the right data on it.
All that bit's all in Excel. That's not even Power BI.
Yeah, so this is a Microsoft Power Query stuff is in Excel as well as Power BI. So you get all the things that we're kind of doing here in Power BI. You can apply the same techniques against Excel. So this isn't necessarily a Power BI standout winning thing, because you can do this in Excel. People probably didn't use that, but it's there. But yeah, the better stuff with Power BI comes on to then the visualizations and how easy it is to manipulate data.
Yeah, well, you've already given me credit card statements importing into Xero or QuickBooks is notoriously difficult. There's no connection. So at the moment, I'm going in, exporting a CSV, manipulating the data into the format that Xero wants, and then uploading it into Xero. Yeah. Whereas this would do it automatically. So I just connect it to the spreadsheet, and it would automatically do that for me. Well, anybody could then do it and import it in. Brilliant. And then the other thing that you've already touched on is we export quite a bit of data of Iris into CSV. And again, we go through the Excel manipulation, whereas Iris is on an SQL database. So we'd be able to connect that straight in, and Iris, it would be able to do it then in real time if we wanted it to. Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so what?
Sorry, did you want to add on to that? Because I've got a lot of excited people at the moment.
Do I want to add on to your comments?
Yeah.
No, that's exactly right.
Brilliant. You're breaking up again for me. Hello, can anybody else hear Joe? Joe's gone again. Yeah, it's gone. Nikolai says it's gone. If you stop sharing your screen, Joe, just see if that helps. Nope. So do you add? So in answer to Tina's question in the chat box, and I'll just confirm this as well when Joe comes back. I believe that is correct. Yes, you just add the existing file to the source. So the first step was the source. You just change the source to the new source, the new file, and then it will process all of the steps on that new source. So I'm hoping that's what it does. Joe's obviously disappeared. Well, he's disappeared from my screen anyway, so he'd be running around, pedaling a bit harder, no doubt, and he'll be back shortly. Ian, I've got your question. Michael, I'm not sure I understand your question around SharePoint, but I'll obviously ask that when Joe comes back. It's something that I'm interested in. I've written down, will it work with SharePoint? Because SharePoint is something that we've just recently started playing with or moving over to. And then can you import your setting from BI into Excel? I'll ask him that as well, Craig, when he comes back, which he now has.
I've given up on my home internet. I'm now, I don't know how good the quality is going to be, but I'm now on 4G.
4G, brilliant. So just finishing off, I've got some questions. Tina says, do you add to the existing file? So once you've set up that process, do you just change the source, Joe, for the next new file, or do you just save it over the old file? How does that bit work?
Yeah, the way I do it, well, it depends what the circumstances are and how much control you've got over it. If you can, saving it over the source file is easier because you can just refresh that source file. But you can equally, if it's like files where they get added to a folder each month and you have no control over that, it's just a new file every month, then you can equally look at that folder and run a task against that folder. So it brings all of that data in and merges it all together. So you can do either.
So can it interrogate that folder and do the most recent file, for example?
It can, or you could do, and then you'd query what's on the file name. So if there's a date reference, you could use that, right. Or you could just bring it all in, because again, once we get the data into Power BI, you kind of want to bring the data into Power BI because then you can manipulate it. So it doesn't really matter if it's all the data, because you can then fine tune the date. So just to make sure that we cover those kind of things, I wanted to give the examples, and hopefully by now it should have given you the realization you can automate a lot of these tasks. I don't want to spend too much time just doing that because I want to get on the dashboard. So you can do that. And then in Blue Peter style, here's one I did earlier, sort of thing. So other things you can do once you've brought data in. Well, actually, that's a big jump. Let's go back a little bit. So
just while you do that, I will say to Nikolai, yes, it does link directly to Xero, and Joe's going to show us how to do that before we disappear today.
Yeah, let me share my screen again. Okay, so once you've manipulated all of the data, it applies that. So just go back to where we were. So in the top left-hand corner, you've got this close and apply, or you can simply apply if you're going to do other rules against it. When you do that, what it's doing is saying, send this information, all these changes I've made to the structure of the data, send that back to the dashboard. So that's what that would do. And then now, for example, I've got in here, I've got somewhere. Yes, so state and region, for example, are now separated and stuff like that. So, and then it's a case of dragging. You can drag the data onto the canvas. So on the right hand side, you've got the columns. When you drag it onto the canvas, it will come up with what it thinks it will do. So you can see the actual revenue. It's got the like sum function, which shows that can be calculated. That's a calculus information, so it can be summed or do calculations on it. So when you drag it in, so quite simply, actual revenue, all it's done is totaled it all up, and it's put it in a column chart. If we didn't want it in it like a bar chart, if we just wanted a card, like a little display of what is our total and actual revenue, we can do that. At the moment, that's totaling all of the lines for the entire, let's say, Excel sheet, totals all of them up. But what about if we wanted to, I don't know, let's have a look at that based on the, can't do continent, let's do based on state as a legend. And then it starts to break those things up. But we might go, well, I don't want to see everything. I just want to see, the revenue for the top 10 states. That would be more useful to see. So once you've created a chart, you can apply filters against it. So we've got the fields on the far right-hand side. They are then dragged into these wells, these spaces for information. And then the next column, which can be hidden and revealed, like all of these things, we've then got filters. And you'll notice on the filters, we've got filters on this visual. So that's that graph basically, or chart that I've got selected. We've got filters on this page. And as you can see at the bottom, we're on page 1, but we can have multiple pages. So if you apply a filter on a page, it will affect every graph or chart that we've got here. or you can have filters on all pages. So that basically means it doesn't matter how many pages you do for your report. If we want to exclude USA because it's not relevant to our report, we could exclude it across the whole thing by putting an exclusion in here. And the way that you use filters is when you've dragged things onto your chart, it will automatically add them here as potential filters. Or we can pick something completely different. So if we wanted to use the city name, for example, we could drag that into a filter. And we can start to apply filters here as well. But in my example, like I said, we might not want to see every single state. What we might want to see is just the highest revenue ones. So we could choose the filter for this visual. And instead of just basic filtering where we would like pick them out, instead of that, when it updates, it's slow. So instead of just picking them out, we want to know what the top 10 by revenue are. So we can choose top N. And we want the top 10 states. And by what value? Well, we want it by actual revenue. And we can just drag the actual revenue onto by value. And then we can apply that filter. And now we have a pie chart just showing us the top 10 revenue, the top 10 states by revenue. And when we hover over that, we can get the full information. So when you hover over it, it's called a tool tip. So we can add additional tooltips in. So if we wanted to know what the percentage difference was, we could add that into tooltips. And when you hover over now, you get, in a second, you get a percentage difference as well. I'm not entirely sure what that figure means, but relative to each of those states. Okay, so that's how it works in its basic principles. You drag data across. You change visualizations by using the visualization screen here. So if we wanted to see it as a bar chart, column chart, for example, we could do that as well. But it's just literally one click to try and gain that information. Now, going on to like practical examples. So a practical example from our business. So we do IT support services. So one of the things that I was looking at, and something that might be useful to anyone that's got Office 365 as well, is, you know, with the fact that people are furloughing staff at the moment, and we need to look at demands. So we need to look at how busy we are now versus before COVID-19 and things like that. So what we can do is we can take information from, let's say, for example, email. I'll do this again to show you all the steps. And I'll create a new blank sheet. So this is as if we're brand new from the start. Well, what I want to do is I want to get some data. Now, I want to get information on a mailbox that we use for receiving email about support inquiries. So again, a lot of businesses will probably have something similar. They'll have a shared mailbox or a source mailbox where inquiries come to, or the cases come to, or things like that. And if it's sat within Office 365, we can go and get that data and pull the information in. So when we do get data, I'm going to look for Exchange Online. That's basically the email element of Office 365. And then I'm just going to put the mailbox. You have to have permissions to this mailbox for this to work. But we have a solutions@reformed-it.co.uk mailbox. Connect to that. And then it comes up with what it can see in those mailboxes. I'm interested in mail. And when you click on mail, it will give you a preview on the right hand side. So inbox, it kind of gives you the subject line, sender. Yeah, that's all. That's what I want. So I want the mail information. And I'm going to load that into Power BI. Okay, it's calling it mail 2 because I've already done a separate mailbox. So that mailbox there, and I'll rename it in a second. So this mailbox here is actually, that's our support mailbox. Okay, so that's where all our support cases come into. And this mailbox is our solutions mailbox. So that's where our requests for solutions come in, basically. It's created a bit of an error because it can't see the name. In fact, I'm just going to put that back so it doesn't break everything for the time being. But you can rename those tables. Just make sure you rename them before you start going and creating everything else. And then in solutions, so we've now got our solutions mailbox. And if I start to drag data from here, so for example, I could drag in the subject line of the email, and you can see it's picked up subjects that have been sent into our solutions inbox. Okay, but I don't particularly want that. Or the only purpose I want this for is I want to look at the date and time that the email was received. And I'm going to just choose a table format. What I always recommend to people is when you start to build the data to validate it, to make sure it's what you want, kind of start with either the table or the matrix, which is like a pivot table. If you start with that, you can assess whether the information you're pulling in is correct. Okay, so I want the dates, and you can see all the dates there. I also, the ID, the mail ID, is a unique reference. So if I pull that in, you can see on screen in that table that each one has got a unique identifier for every single email that comes in. So that'd be useful, because what I can then do is I can choose on the drop down for the ID, I can choose to count all of the distinct ID references. So now what I've got is a count of how many mails there were on a particular day. So that information is now becoming quite useful. But again, I'm not going to sit there and look at it as a table like that, because it doesn't provide much visual information to me about what's going on. So what I could do is something like a line chart. And again, you're looking at that and thinking that's not useful. But what it does by default is it uses these elements of the date. So it's got a year, a quarter, a month, and a day. Now, for us, I'm not bothered about quarters, so I can actually remove that. But at the top of the line chart here, a line graph, I've got the ability to expand down or to move down the hierarchy. And that's basically these elements here. So if you click on the merge, it merges the year with the month. So now I can see month by month how many emails we had come into the solution mailbox. So that would give us an idea of how sales are doing, basically, in new inquiries. And then I can merge it down again, and it gives me a day-by-day basis as well. Now, that might not look too pretty, so I could change it into like an area chart or something like that. And obviously, I can just move the graph around. I can make it whatever size I want. Also, you can see that I've got that period of time from all the way back from November 2019 till now. I might not be too bothered about that far back. So what I could do on this graph is I could filter that down by date. So if I drag over the date received onto the filters and then drop down, I've got this ability to choose relative date filtering. So if I hit relative date filtering, I can then specify how long I want to look at in terms of days. So I could say I only want to know the last 60 days, or you can even do it by calendar months. So let's say 3 calendar months. That's what I'm interested in. And if I apply that filter now, it basically cuts the chart down, just showing us now the last 3 months and the demand over the last 3 months on our solutions mailbox. But we can even hover over and see, on 16th of April 2020, we had 11 emails come into the solutions mailbox. So essentially, that's how you do it. You just drag the information on, you choose the chart that's relevant to what you're looking at or you're assessing. Going back to our previous page, even though I broke it, second. Just there we go. Right. So when, the refreshing it's doing now is going to the data source and pulling all the data back in. So when we were saying earlier about how to import the data, importing data is simply point it at the data source, and when you're in Power BI, you just hit the refresh button at the top, and that will go away and and pull back all of the data. That's actually broken. I'll do that again. 1 second. It's going well here. There we go. Right. So so now we've got a graph here of, and this is our support mailbox. This is a different one to our sales, but you can see like the periods each day and how busy it was, and you can see the odd spike here. But what might be quite useful to know is that some sort of rolling average. So we've got the ability to do quick measures. This is kind of like your maths things and evaluating data. So any data that's in here, we can do maths or queries against it. So I'm going to do a quick measure, and I'm going to be interested in a rolling average. Okay, and the base value for our rolling average is going to be a count of the ID, because that's what I'm doing. I'm counting how many emails there are coming through. The date is going to be the date received. Period, I'm going to do it on days, and I'm going to evaluate 7 days before and 1 day after as our rolling average time. When you hit OK on that, it will basically create this measure, and a measure will show up as a little calculator icon in the right-hand side for the field, and we are able to add that on and stick that into our values, either as a value field, or we can put it as a secondary value as well. Move that out of the way. I should have probably done 7 days rolling before and after. 1 second. Makes it a bit better. Okay, so we have now our rolling average that's over the top. So again, we can add that into our values, and then we can start to see, as well as the outliers, we can start to see trends in terms of peaks and demands of our mailbox over time. So this is where you start to use the data to analyze things and to make better decisions. So we can see peaks and troughs. As well as our emails, we've also got a telephone system that allows us to export and CSVs of all of the call logs into our main telephone number. So if I'm able to take out all our call logs and bring that data in, I can then apply a similar theory as this, but I can do it with our telephones. And that's what I've done here as well. So this is basically our graph of how many inbound telephone calls we received on a day-by-day basis. And you can see a massive spike here. That was the 24th of March, 2020. So for anyone, you might guess that was the date that we went into government lockdown. And the 23rd and 24th saw a massive peak on our support calls because everybody needed to work from home. But you can see that was a massive outlier in our general average for inbound calls on our support team. But this is where information is useful when you have peaks and troughs to better predict or to better understand when you have those and what was the cause of them. So I know that particular outlier was due to lockdown, but that's because I know it. If we'd have looked at this, we need to analyze what's going on at that particular time. The other thing as well that Power BI does really well is you can link charts together. So here, as well as our telephone demands, I've also created a little pie chart to specify who answered the phone. And you can see across the board, I don't answer the phone very often, with 1% of all calls I answer. So that's who's available in our support team. And when the calls are answered, that's who answers them, which is quite good. But we could want to know what happened on that particular day and who was answering the calls. So if I click into that particular point in time, you can see that it's put a dot on it, and it's now broken down the percentages of the calls based on who answered those calls. Again, the good one from HMRC's perspective, we did end up furloughing staff. So about this point, we furloughed staff, and you can see it drops off. So now we can prove that Cara and Steve never answered a call on any of those dates. And then you can see when they come back. So useful information, you can click into graphs and it manipulates other parts of the data, and you can do that in various ways as well. So you can see demand by Stephen Clark across those dates just by choosing his name there as well. So that's again one of the advantages of Power BI when it comes to data visualization, is it's not just static data. You can interact with one part of the data and it moves the goalpost for the others, so that you can start to understand what affects what. Now, the one thing with that is you might not want that. You might not want a chart to change based on some other information being selected, but you might want another chart to change. So there's the ability to change this in data in your formatting option. You've got this edit interactions button. So that's currently selected and on. So I can choose that when I'm selecting something on this chart, I can tell it what to do here. So I can either show a percentage or highlight a percentage of the overall numbers. And then if I select something here, it then shows you the originals and it breaks it down as a smaller information about what was used on that particular day. Or I might not want it to manipulate that at all. So don't change this chart. If I go around selecting on here, just leave that as it is. So you can start to manipulate what happens when you select certain elements of another chart. So that's useful as well. In terms of, I want to make sure that we cover off the zero element as well. Pretty keen on that. So in terms of zero, we can't see the data. When we go to get data, we can't see zero in that list. But what we can do is we can create a data set, a Power BI data set in the Power BI service, and then we can link that to zero. So just to quickly show you how that works. Okay, so online we go to app.powerbi.com. So this is now the online service of Power BI. And just to come back to licensing, so you can use Power BI desktop free of charge. You don't need to pay anything to download and use that. So all those things I've just been showing you, you don't need to spend any money on that. You can also get a free account, Power BI free account, which you can register with your Microsoft account. So you can have that, but all that will let you do is publish into your own workspace rather than share and collaborate the dashboards and reports with other people, with other colleagues. If you want to be sharing online within the Power BI service with your colleagues, then you would need a Power BI Pro license, which is £7.50 per user per month. But if I just sign in, so this is my Power BI dashboard online. You can get a trial of Power BI Pro. I think I'm using a trial at the moment.
So just while that loads up, Joe, I've got a couple of questions that I think we might be able to now. Ian, I think your question on the rolling 12-month averages for the sales invoices, I think Joe answered that. You just need to be able to get the data and then you can set it up to report however you like. So I think we covered that one off, Ian. If not, then please feel free to ask it again. I'm just conscious of the time.
Yeah.
Michael said, can you point Power BI at staff emails too, so we can get practice data? That's exactly the thought that went through my mind, Michael. We've been trying to get quantity of emails and response times and all sorts of things. So you're just giving me, I believe, a fantastic way of getting that. So that's a yes, Joe, is it?
It is, yeah. The only thing, I kind of mentioned it briefly, but you need permission to those mailboxes. So as long as you have permission to those mailboxes, which need to be done obviously at the top level, then yes, that's fine. You will be able to link your user account within Power BI and pull that information through. So yes, you can do it with permission.
And then Ian has asked, is Mac based? Is there any differences between Power BI for the PC or the Mac? Do you know?
I'm not sure. This is going to be a bummer. I'm not actually sure if they've got Power BI desktop for the Mac. I don't know if they have. Let me just quickly Google.
Okay, I'm sure Ian can do that, Joe. So he'll have a look to see if they can. Craig's asked, can you import your settings from BI into Excel?
Yes. So those things we were talking about earlier, these query settings, you can copy those settings into Power BI and vice versa. Yes.
Brilliant.
So you can go into the advanced editor and copy them, yeah.
And I think, Michael, your question that you then made clear, I think Joe's already answered it, but Michael said. He said you point the data source in the folder in SharePoint. So I'm presuming you just drop monthly data files into a folder, and if there's any duplicate data, say June's report shows May and June, it would pick up the duplicate data. So yeah, you just change the parameters. So you just put the file in and you change the parameters to extract what data you want out of the file, basically. Is that?
Yeah, essentially you pull all the data in as much as like, and then you use filters and things to then fine tune exactly what you want. If there's duplicates, there is the option in the Power BI query editor to look for duplicates and things like that. So remove duplicates, for example, is just an option you can use.
And then Ian said, can you only share with colleagues or can you share with clients as well? So can you share outside of the domain?
You can share with guests, but the same rules apply. So if it's a guest user, the guest user would still need a Power BI Pro. The only workaround to that is Power BI Premium, but nobody's going to be doing that. It's over £3,000 a month to use Power BI Premium. So yeah, you can share with guests, but they need a license. And the other thing is that you can do public dashboards. So you can have a Power BI Pro, and with this permission setup, you can publish reports online so that they're publicly accessible. But that's obviously that means that anybody can get access to it if they've got the link. So that's a bit risky if it's private data. So.
Okay, and I'll just before you finish off on the zero, I'm conscious of the time, and some people might have to disappear. But I know there was an opportunity for you to help people, Joe. If anybody needed any help setting it up, I look at that and think, God, there's a lot. That's quite a daunting prospect for me personally to sit down and I can get the data, but to actually go through and manipulate it, there's a learning curve. So if anybody wanted any support, Joe, how does that work?
Yeah, I do quite a bit of Power BI consultancy, and again, we are, and apologies for the disruptions, but because we would have got through a lot more, I think, had the internet gone down. But but with Power BI, there's so much you can do. I'm doing some work with a solicitor's firm where they do a lot of consultants report and billing reports and things like that, and it was taking people days and days to do these reports, and they haven't got any fancy graphs, to be honest. It's not like this, they don't have fancy graphs, but what they were finding is that the repetitiveness of the process of manipulating data and changing things and then producing it into a report that they could pass to the consultants to give them billing information was just taking so long. So we ended up automating all of that and putting it all through Power BI straight from the SQL database on their case management system. And yeah, it's made their life a hell of a lot easier. So yeah, and they become pretty self-sufficient once the report's built. They know how to interact with it, modify it, change the filters and things like that. In fact, quickly while I'm on this one, and I think it will be really relevant, you know, when people are starting to use this more, let me cover this. So for example, we've got this period of time here, but in order to filter that down, I would have to go into the filters and then choose the period of time that I want to cover. That might not be, you know, if you're handing a report to somebody to manage, you don't want them messing about with these filters. So there's a really handy feature in Power BI called slicers. I think this might exist in Excel. It does exist in Power BI, I think in Excel as well. But slicers, if you grab a slicer, what you can do is you can then tell it what you want to filter and what to apply it to. So for example, we can get that slicer, and that was for this particular mailbox. So I could get that and choose the date received. Come on, computer. And then you've then got this ability for the user to manage it themselves. Cool. Normally do. Broken something. Wait 1 second. By average. Yeah, that's the right data. Data received.
The wonders of technology, Joe. So what I'll do is I'll pop your LinkedIn profile in the chat box. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, I've got an instant hit from my perspective, because we're currently exporting data out of Iris into an Excel spreadsheet in order to calculate turnaround times. So when a job comes in and when it leaves, and I know that you're going to look at that and go, yeah, just do this, Simon. And it takes us about 3 hours a month, or it takes somebody within the organization about 3 hours a month to produce that data. So all of a sudden it's gone from it's even gone from a monthly process to potentially a real-time process if we could link it to the SQL database in Iris. And just while that finishes off, Craig has asked, can you link BI to QuickBooks and Tax Calc? You definitely can QuickBooks, because I see that on the list as it went through. What does it need? Does it need an SQL, or is there an API that it needs? Joe, I'm floundering with the language now. So.
Yeah, so so a lot of them have got built-in functionalities for. So yeah, QuickBooks was on there. If it works with QuickBooks, it'll use something called OAuth, I think. So you basically just put your user account details in, and it'll link that to your QuickBooks account. In a similar way, let's finish off this Xero.
Yep,
in a similar way to how this Xero works. So on here, you've got the ability. I've got a COVID-19 one even. So you can go and you can look for applications. So you go, once you've signed into Power BI, you go to applications, and I've already kind of done this, but you do get apps. And then there's a list of all this sort of data. So you can have a look through this as well. This is way more than what you'll see within Power BI Get Data as well. So this says 300 and stuff. But in here, you want Xero. So we've got the Xero connector. And then on 4G, it loads eventually. I've skipped this. So, so you do the get apps. I've already done that. It puts it on here, and then you've got the ability to go in and connect your data. And then that's when it links to your account. So you basically sign in, and it will then link to your Xero account and pull. It'll ask you which company you want to pull through. I'm just using demo data for this, but you can then go in and click Xero.
So just while it does that, oh, there we go. So, am I right in saying that any software that's got what I will call an open API, it can link to that?
Not necessarily. It's not as blanket as that. There still needs to have been some development happened to allow Power BI to pull the data out of it.
So your question on Center, you won't know about Center, I don't think, Joe. You don't know. So your question,
search for it in the apps.
In the App Store, Rajesh, yeah.
I mean, if there's a database behind it and you can get access to the data, that's the other thing. You can go to the application vendors in more times than not and say, can I have some read-only access to the database? And if you can do that, you can link it to Power BI. So that's the other way. But here you go. This is an example dashboard of Xero that is just automatically creates. So you can go through and again, you've got all the kind of monthly reports and expense accounts and all of that. Now that's within the online service, so you can see all of this information, and it gives you even gives you links into the specific places in Xero to go and find that information, which is quite cool. So you can do all that, but one thing you can do from the Power BI desktop, if it loads quick enough, is that we can do Power BI data sets. So once you've linked it on the service, I need to create a new report. But once you've linked into the service, you can then go to Power BI datasets. It will connect to the online service. And then if you want to completely manually in Power BI desktop to mess about with the data and pull things through and make it your own, you can do that as well. So you can do that here. You can also do it online. So if I go back to Accounts Xero, so on here, we've got reports. You've got a Xero report there. I'm going to start singing soon, Simon. Right, and then again, this is where you've got the multiple like pages and tabs with different things, so you can analyze customers, suppliers, inventory, balance sheet, profit and loss. So again, this is kind of a built-in report that Power BI and Xero have already come up with eventually. Come on.
So just while you finish off on that, Rajesh, I've just put the link in the box again. So it's basically if you search for Joe Burns with an S on the end in LinkedIn, then you'll find Joe's profile. If you can't find it for whatever reason, then just drop me a thing and I'll pop it in a LinkedIn message or whatever. Perfect, got it. That's got it now. Just while that continues loading, I just want to Sanetta, your question around moving from we've got a physical server in the office at the moment, and on there we've got some Excel spreadsheets that if somebody's in, then the other people can't get in. So I want to put that on SharePoint, and I'm still playing it, and Joe's going to cringe now, but we're still playing with SharePoint and OneDrive in order to work out how that works. We've also got some documents which the members of the Accountants Mastermind share with each other, and SharePoint feels like the right place for us to put those documents. So that's why. And then Tim's just asked, in addition to the Office 365 subscription, looks like you need to pay an additional £7.50 a month for Power BI Pro, which you need for the Xero connection. Is that right? Do you know that?
Yeah, I think I was trying earlier to see. So with the Power BI service, the only bit you get for free with the Power BI service is your own My Workspace. I was trying to play earlier to see if I could link Xero into My Workspace, so it's just for me, but I haven't sussed that. So yes, I believe that's correct. You would probably need at least one Power BI Pro user in order to get that into a workspace that you can use. Okay, so Power BI Pro is £7.50 per user per month. That's to use the online service, to share, to collaborate, so that people can go in to reports and dashboards that you've created and manipulate the data and view it and things like that. So you need a Power BI Pro license for the creators that are going to publish it, and for the consumers, the people that are going to view it.
Brilliant, excellent, thank you. That's covered off all the questions in the box. This is what the Xero thing looks like.
Yeah, yeah. Even though it takes ages to load because I'm on 4G, but if you and on a video conference, but obviously across the bottom, you've got the different tabs. Now, the one thing I was going to say is you can then edit the report. So you can do this with the online service as well. So you can go in, edit the report. And this looks very similar to the Power BI desktop version we have. It's not got complete control of everything. Like, you can't do the Power Query on this stuff, but you can then go in and choose your own fields and manipulate what fields are in each report, and change them and customize it to your desires, basically. There is also the map interface. I did have some demonstration data with the maps, which is really cool. So if you've got clients spread over, a geographic region, and you can then start to build things in, like which customers in which region are spending the most money with you, and do cool stuff like that. So you can start to map things out physically and geographically.
Excellent. I know I'm conscious that we're 15 minutes overdue, Joe. So I know that I can talk to you about this for hours. So it's firing off all sorts of ideas within my head. Just very quickly, once we've set the report up, could it email me like a snapshot of the report every morning at say 9 o'clock, or do you have to physically go in and have a look?
So one of the things you could do is you could put, talking about Teams, you could link the dashboards into Teams so it's straight there. So you've got, because this is the thing with Power BI, you try and get away from email as such because it's dynamic real-time data. So the idea being, the one thing I didn't speak about and I wanted to show you is you can put a Power BI app on your phone, right? And then on this mobile view, you can then decide what information the mobile phone consumers should see and what it should look like. So you can start to build a mobile formatted chart, put the Power BI app on your mobile, and instead of email, instead of Teams, if you're out and about and you want quick real-time access to your data in metric format, so how well is the business going, traffic light systems, graphs, charts, visualizations, that can all be on your fingertip on a mobile phone with one click of an app, which makes it really useful as well.
Brilliant. We're going to have to call it a day there. Craig
Yeah.
just said it's brilliant. Thank you so much, Joe. Yeah, we're getting lots of thank yous, and mind blown, I think, is the it's certainly, as I said at the beginning of the conversation, Joe, I didn't know anything about Power BI, and all of a sudden it's opening my imagination to a whole load of stuff that I wanted to that I've been wanting to do for a long time and just never had the opportunity or the possibility. We've tried bodging. Go on. Go on.
Oh, I have got. There was also one thing that I really wanted to share with people, and I've completely forgotten about. And I'm now trying to find somewhere where I've got some data to use for it. Oh no, this is a nightmare. It's not going to be that quick. There is a functionality called Analyze, okay, and it's really good for when you've got dates and things. So if you've got dates with information that's happened over, God, I've got nothing that's any good. Yeah, if you've got various dates and you've got a chart like that, a bar chart or something, you can right-click on the bar chart, and there's a function, yeah, I can't see it on here. There's a function called Analyze, basically. We used to do it, am I still online? Yeah. We used to do it a lot with my previous business, where we'd look at monthly invoice values, the total invoice value, and we'd have a chart like this, and it'd be month by month where we're at. And if you right click, there's an option called Analyze when you're doing things on date. And what that will do is it'll analyze what the differences was between one month and the other. So instead of having somebody want to go, somebody thinking, oh, why did our invoice value go down this month? You know, what's happened? Which customer did we lose, or what products have we lost? You can literally right click. It will bring up a new window and it'll explain to you in simple terms exactly what happened that month. You can have water flow charts. So it'll say, you know, you decreased, like for us, it might say you decreased on Office 365 sales, or one customer would existed one month and didn't the next. So when it's really difficult because you're not in the business totally full time, you can start to very quickly see what's going on in the business just by clicking a couple of links. What I'll do, Simon, is I'll do a video demonstration of that. I'll send it to you, share it with the network so they can get an idea of how it works. So.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you very much, Joe. Despite the technical abilities or difficulties, as I said, it's blown my mind, and I will definitely be having a conversation with you or introducing you to somebody in Greenstones in order for them to show you what we're currently doing in order for you to smash that out of the park. So that would be brilliant. Thank you very much to everybody. We've still got over 30 people on the call, so people obviously been getting value from it, and lots of thank yous coming through. I'm almost certainly gonna beg you to come back, Joe. show us some more stuff, especially around that zero stuff. But we need to have a conversation about that in order to make sure that it's working for you as well as working for us in the community, because I know it's definitely working from my side. So if anybody wants to have a conversation with Joe about a spreadsheet or something that they've got that they think might be able to organise, then contact Joe on that LinkedIn profile. I'll just put it in the chat box again so everybody's got it. Or if you can't find Joe for whatever reason, then contact me and I will gladly share the details. There is a recording. The recording will be filed, and we'll leave the guppy conversation and the chick conversation as well, because that makes the chicks then tax deductible from a point of view. And I will make sure we'll send it out as soon as we've got it sorted out. So brilliant, Joe. Thank you very, very much for your time. First round of applause.
Thank you. Sorry for the disruptions. If anyone is on LinkedIn connected to me and have found my content useful, then I also appreciate any recommendations that people can do as well.
Brilliant. Definitely put them on there and tell people how brilliant Joe is. So thank you very much, Joe. Thank you very much for everybody coming along, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. See ya.
Cheers, Joe. Bye-bye.